That smells a little bit like an electrical fire.
Why, we get a firefighter here, and all of a sudden everyone's
Everything's
sniffing mics.
We're all. Whoa, dude, you got.
I just want to get the room catching on fire as hot as it is. That's it.
We really brought you in just for Randy, like
Yeah.
specifically.
No, this is great, man.
This is a good interview to see if you can replace him.
Hey guys, welcome to the Words of the Woodsman podcast. We're glad you're here. If you've noticed, if you're watching this, you would notice, but if you're listening to it, I don't really know of any way you have noticed. But we have a fourth person here today. 1, 2, 3, 4. Randy,
That's
comes
hey,
after
if they
3
get
and
on
before
all of my
5.
fingers.
Yeah,
Just like when when you're fishing and you get so many, you got to stop.
yeah.
You're past your mark.
Well, we want to welcome our good friend. He is a huge supporter of our ministry, and a good friend of mine, and most importantly, our brother in Christ, Michael. He's a firefighter here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and man, we're glad to have you today.
Welcome.
Yeah.
We've been talking about it for a while, so
Finally get a
excited to
chance to
finally
get
do
you
it, yeah.
here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, what we're doing is we're hosting auditions for Randy.
it kind of stinks.
It's kind of awkward that you're here and he's
bar's-
here at the same
One of the
time.
things you just kind of
Yeah.
learn.
The bar's pretty low.
Yeah.
Good, I can count to
Not
4.
to
So.
do, what you can do.
Right. Well, Michael, we got you here today, and so we just wanted to kind of take a minute and let you share your story of how you came to know Jesus, and kind of from there, like kind of how you bring Jesus into what you do.
Cool. So started back, So been in church as a kid. Parents took me. It didn't really mean much, just because I didn't really know what it was. It was fun. I had friends there, and that's kind of what it was. I used to go with my cousins. Even to the church that I go to now. Back in the days when it was in a mall, back in Oak Ridge, where I was born and raised anyway. So.
That's why you glow a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
All the radioactivity.
That goes on.
Why are you sitting so close to me?
You cannot edit
Hot
that
over here,
clear. So I did that, went to several churches, kind of fast forward till about 15 or 16. My parents got divorced, come from a broken home. And the way we found out was, it wasn't the best way. We came home one day from school and just all my dad's stuff was gone. So there's no word of it. Kids are smart. They're intuitive. They know that when things aren't the best. So came home one day and everything was gone. My sister knocked on my door, and that's kind of how I found out, which obviously started a long, hard path of recovery and just kind of learning what it is to be a man. That's pretty critical years for being a man, considering before that, the years before that too, there was some shortcomings. I don't blame my father. He was he's a human just like everybody else, makes his own mistakes. But in that whole time, I was still going to church. And so I remember going on to a youth camp one time. And it was my favorite youth camp ever. It was so fun. I was in the middle of Kentucky or something. That was in the middle of nowhere.
Out in the woods.
Yeah.
Sounds about like
That's where best youth camps happen.
Middle of nowhere.
Man, and what I remember is 2 things. One, it took forever. So there was like this building on top of a hill that you had to get to in order to go to where all the music was and where we did our sermons and lessons for that night. And it was after everybody was done playing for the day. And so you have this giant hill that you have to climb. And, some of the volunteers were older. And so, we had a couple people fall out, but it was all right. In that, I remember we were listening as a band. His name was Chuck Hooten. He was actually one of our pastor's friends. And they just started playing the song, it was a couple nights in. And I just remember this tug on my heart. It was different than anything I felt. It wasn't a nervousness. It wasn't there's nothing, it didn't feel bad. It was very peaceful. And what I attribute to it was just the Lord was like, it's the time. Now's the time. That's amazing. To seek to seek me. And so it was cool because it was in the midst of all the divorce and all the stuff. It was a little bit after. So the fact that I was there, it was amazing. It was one of my first ones. Which actually, that now that I'm talking about it, it reminds me. As I was a kid, I was super young, but I was young enough for my sister and I to share a room in our house, and I was up late. We had a TV in our room, which probably not the best idea for young kids, but anyways, it felt like I was up super late, like 2 or 3 a.m., but it was probably like 10:30 or something like that. And I swear, just the most clear, concise voice, like you and I are talking right now, I just heard my name called, and it was thunderous. It was direct, but it was also, I was scared. I was scared. But I'll never forget it because I got up and I ran to my parents' room, and I was just like, I heard my name called. It was clear as day, and I remember, like, I just remember it, and I just looked around. I was like, that was God. God talked to me. So being young. So like I said, that was years back. Skip forward to now, to where I ended up giving my life at that camp. It's Camp Awana. And that's kind of where my story begins. I always thought I was a decent person. I was good. I was probably a little shy. Still tend to be on the quieter side of things. But yeah, I was super shy. But I remember just feeling different coming out of worship that day. Just completely different. The rest of the week was different for me. God was obviously calling me and meeting me where I was. And so fast forward today, I've been serving in the ministries that I serve in for 20 years, coming up next year. Serving a couple different ministries, lead one for our medical team. But it's been a crazy adventure, especially about 13 years ago, started into my EMS career and fire career, which obviously is where I am today. So it's been a wild adventure, a lot of learning, a lot of hard lessons to be learned. But that's why I wanted to come here and share my story too. There's people who've had harder lives than I have. There's no doubt about that. Divorce is hard. A lot of people's parents get divorced, but what you do after that and really surrendering to the Lord is what I think made all the difference of where I am now and where my life is going to go.
Yeah. So I do have a question.
Yeah.
Because it's always curiosity to me. It's your parents, when they were together, it was just going to church and coming home, right?
For the most part.
Yeah. And I only ask because I know you and your wife, Kelsey, are very involved. You guys are in there with the kids. And a lot of parents, I think Zach's one of them, where his family was going.
Mm-hmm.
And then they ended up divorced and church kind of disappeared.
Yep.
So it's kind of neat to see where, in your case, God tugged on you and brought you in a different light, a different way, the way you and your family's going. You changed to projection of what the Rutgers were going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's huge. I mean, your boys' life's changed. And
Yeah.
you got a daughter, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one. I don't know that well because she was.
Yeah, she's.
I don't do diapers when I worked in kids. Well, I'm at their age level. I act their age, so.
Mentally, I'm right there with them, man.
Yeah. So I mean, I just think that is awesome, and I know there's other men out there that take a totally different route during that.
Well, and I'll ask you this question
Yeah.
too. I didn't really prepare you for this one, but it's just kind of where we're going,
That's
right?
what I like impromptu.
What kind of did that bring any kind of? Because I know for me, I can answer on my part in a little bit, but did that bring any hesitation, given the background you came from, walking into your marriage with Kelsey initially?
No, it didn't.
Oh, really?
I spoke over my life, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I spoke in my life from an early age that my life was not going to look like their life.
That's
Now,
so good.
there's a lot to it. It's not just a black and white thing.
Right.
But I knew that my marriage was going to survive. I don't care what it takes. It's going to survive. And we've been through some hard times. We'll get into that. But I knew that. I knew that I was going to love my kids in a way that was totally unconditional. Even though they might not do things that I agree with, or their path may not be things that I would personally do. But I just knew the father figure that I wanted to be was definitely some of the shortcomings of my own father. I think we're all like that. We always say, well, I'm going to do this because they didn't do that, So, like I said, not harping on him at all, but I just know that I wanted my child or my children's lives and my marriage to look different than what I grew up with.
Yeah.
And kind of a point to you said earlier is that maybe another gentleman on here went a different way, whereas I am very involved. There was actually more active resistance from my family to go to church, but I continued to ask. My cousins actually went to the church that we're going to now, and so they were actually a big proponent in helping me get there. I would drive with friends. My parents didn't really want to take me. They were busy. They're going through their own stuff, and if I told them, hey, if I get a ride, can I do it? And eventually, they agreed. So, and of course, now here we are. It's
Here you are.
I mean, really, if you look back to the mall days, I mean, I've probably been attending this church for 30 years now at this point. I mean,
Wow.
it was a long time. It's crazy to think about because I'm 34, so maybe not 30 years. I don't know. That may be my
I
timeline.
started driving when I was 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just hold on here.
I'll be honest, my timeline since I started working 24-hour shifts, for those that don't know, is
I can
whack. My timeline's probably messed up.
That was when Randy was 30.
So I bet you it's closer to 25 years.
Randy
then.
was just getting married at that point.
Yeah.
not 95. 2000 was marriage.
Well,
Yeah.
I was born in 91, so that's probably way off. So, yeah. So
mean-
probably about 25 years.
I mean,
Maybe longer.
when you enjoy going somewhere and you're invested in it, you don't keep track of the years. You just go, I've been here, the lives that I've helped get along, just like the people that kept bringing you church. You said your cousins.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many students that you guys know and that I know that are bringing other people because their parents don't want to bring them?
Yeah.
Oh,
We
yeah.
had students doing that. Man, it's going to change their lives. Like it's happening to them, I think that's awesome. But
Well, and I've seen how many, even how many relationships, like boyfriend, girlfriend, like I've seen, there's been so many girls that have brought men to the feet of God.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that should be your approach by any means, but I'm saying that God will use that, right?
Yeah. He'd use any situation. All it takes really is just one person.
Being obedient.
That's it. You and I talk about that so much.
Well, so we kind of got the beginning and the end here. So one of the questions I have is, because we've all worked with students, is that students might go on a retreat like you did, accept Jesus. But I'm curious as to see what the next few steps you took immediately following that we could give to our listeners, because it's working.
So are you wanting to know more specifically about the middle part of that?
Well, just like, so you get home from church, how old were you? And when you went to that Camp Awana?
Oh gosh, probably 14 or 15,
Right.
somewhere in there.
So this is to the viewers that might be younger or might be a parent or a grandparent.
Parent of a 14 or 15 year old.
Perfect. Right.
And they're screaming for their lives right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you come home from that camp, you just had an amazing experience. You felt God tug on your heart. What were the next things that you did just to make sure that you're
Honestly, just kept going.
okay?
Because my home life was chaos. So I don't really get to, nor did I want to be honest with you, come home and tell my parents, I was living with my mom at that point, but I didn't want to tell them. I didn't really want to be involved at all. I completely shut my mother out. She was going through a lot, so I don't put any blame on her for anything that happened or didn't happen. But I just knew that I had fun where I was going. I wanted to keep going. My life got changed, and then I started looking for ways to serve or to do whatever. So I've been, I mentioned music earlier. I've been doing that for, 20 years.
So you got more involved with the church. You got
Yeah.
more invested in. That was kind of your safe haven.
Yeah. I met some friends while I was there. They started getting into music. So I was like, well, that's cool. I kind of want to learn. And I didn't know a lick about. I didn't know a lick about music.
That makes it even better.
Oh yeah. So like we used to have these chord charts. Now the way we do it is everything's by memory, which I think is better for reasons we can talk about later or whatever. But we used to have these charts, and it's just like a G or a B. Like, what is that? What does that even what does that even mean?
Well, we're all lost right now.
Yeah. And so I had some people teach me. I went out one day. I was like, hey, I want to do this. Bought a guitar. Slowly started learning. I really started learning when, because I used to listen to a lot of Green Day. And so I started learning a lot of their songs. I would, on my TV in my room, there was this DVD, and I would just put it in as a Green Day Live. And I would sit there and play with all the songs. And in typical, teenager fashion, I'm rocking out with them like I thought they're on the
Like
stage.
you're there,
But,
yeah.
Before Rock Band existed.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. That was when TV still had VCRs.
I know.
still
That's
hooked
why you
up.
said DVD. I was surprised.
Yeah. So talking about the old days, man, the CRT TVs or whatever they are.
When I imagine it was like a 14-inch TV and it was so big.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it was, I would say that's probably the next biggest step. I pretty much played, there was a period, oh man. Once I started learning music and learned how to play, I was there every week. And at that point we had practice for Wednesday nights on Tuesday. So we'd come Tuesday, practice, then Wednesday, and practice into the service.
Cool.
And man, call it nostalgia, but we used to put on plays for youth. We used to have people who would do acting. I mean, to me, it was very cool. It's very reminiscent of the early 2000s.
Early 2000s.
Yeah. People nowadays, they don't know what they're missing.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're
It
missing.
was a different time.
Yeah. And so I know that kind of answers your question too, just being more involved. The small group there was part of my cousins. So, and then it actually kind of segues into this because my small group leader I had two of them. One, his name was Butch, and he was just the manliest man, I mean, lives out in
Butch.
Yeah.
What?
That's a
What-
manly name.
Yeah.
like you
He
don't.
wasn't coming out to
Can't be a wimp and Butch.
Oh, and he towered over us. I mean, he towered over us. My other small group leader, his name was Roz. And so he actually was worked on the ambulance. He'd been doing it for a while.
Oh.
And so I started trying to ride along with him. I met another gentleman who was involved in our youth program there, and he was the director of the entire service. So obviously talking to him, talking to my small group leader, and I was like, oh, man, I really want to try this. It looks cool. Just lights and sirens go into like crazy things. Like I didn't really know what it was truly about, but that started my this path towards this career that I've taken.
That's incredible. So you accept Jesus and then you start serving and you start learning music.
Yep.
That sets you for the next 20 years. And then also one of your small group leaders connects you with the services you're still
Go ahead.
with today. That's,
the
that's
thing
amazing.
the thing I want to point out about that, because, for the guy who's, riding in his truck listening to this, and he's wondering, well, what do I do? Right? Like, I want to do this. Man, I would say, I heard the coolest thing the other day. So, I was listening to, they did the whole, Phil Robertson passed away a few weeks ago, and a lot of his kids were reminiscing. And Phil's one of the guys, in the faith I look up to, as far as he's an outdoorsman. He's a godly man. And he, one of the things that he would get on to his kids for saying, we're going to church. Like he would say, you are the church. He said, we're going to go meet with the brothers. Because that's what he called it. And he said the point where his kids would always say, we're going to go meet with the brothers. And like, where? I have to explain that to other people. Like what do you mean by that? And my point is if you're wanting to, if you're new to the faith, or maybe you're not even in the faith yet, and you're interested in it, immerse yourself with fellow believers. Like, surround yourself with them, because that's really, we've been doing this James study for several weeks. a couple months now.
I was gonna say,
a couple months now.
Wow.
weeks,
Almost all the time runs together.
I've missed a lot.
We're almost finishing. We're actually about to finish up James, then we'll be on to the next book. But he's writing to the local church that's about to go into. They're already beginning to deal with some problems. They're in dispersion. They're spread out. But he's encouraging them to encourage one another in this. And I love that you dove right into this, right? You found a way to get to church, no matter what it took, right? Even if you were 4, you made a way to get there, and you surrounded yourself with fellow believers, which actually led to your career right now, and led to more. But I'm not revealing that just yet.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're wanting to stop something or begin something, you want to surround your people with that. Like, you want to stop drinking. Well, going to the bar to meet with your buddies at the bar
not gonna help.
is not going to help.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he was like, I want this, because you said it brought you happiness when you were there and you were excited. Well, why would I want to stop?
Yeah.
Let me put myself where these folks are at, because that's where I feel tugged to.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Well,
yeah, that's
And by nature,
Smart.
in case anyone's encountered this, sometimes you get in those environments and you run into someone who's not acting like they should be there, right? Like
Yeah.
they come in, we all are sinful, we all are broken. I'm not making an excuse for a single person, but if you surround yourself with godly people and you get someone that doesn't act godly, here's the deal: don't let that push you away from that. Accept that as that individual, right? And also note that, hey, they're not acting the way Jesus would have them act, and don't let that stifle you.
Yeah.
yeah.
Continue on, man. Continue on with your story.
Shoot, what else we want to talk about?
So you get off into you get this interest in EMS, kind of pick up from there.
Okay. So, I was working as a server at that point, and then I was asking around what it took to start getting into this field. I originally expressed interest with the fire service, but I also knew that getting into the medical side, the EMS and all that stuff you got to do it nowadays. It's a part of the field, and it's not going away. So I went and got my EMT license. I actually had a great boss. I was working at Calhoun's at the time, and man, it was such a good,
Which is
good
a local
place.
restaurant.
Yeah, it's a local restaurant. It kind of, Southern dining, stuff like that. But
Probably a lot of heart attacks that come out of there.
yeah,
I got some experience.
yeah. And so I was working there, and my boss, his name was Mike. He was very flexible with me. He was one of the few bosses that would actually, if I saw something was wrong, I could come to him, and he would listen. He would take feedback on it, and then you could watch them apply it. So very good. And I told him, hey, I'm about to go to this class. At that point, it was 4 months, which is not a lot, but it's 4 months, and it's very intense. So if I could, focus on this, I'll come back and work and, all that stuff. He was totally cool with it. Didn't ask any questions, was super supportive. And so I was super blessed by that, because, the whole medical field, the whole terminology, the medicines, the skills that we do is completely new to me. And I was, at that point, I was 20 years old. So, cause I remember turning 21 in the middle of class. So that's the only reason I remember that. But I wasn't a partier or anything at that point. So went to class, and then a few months later I had a job offer from the people that I met at church, who I'd got to know a little bit better at that point. It was probably 5 or 6 years at that point. Got a job offer right out of school, started up, and then I've been doing that for the most part ever since. There's been some breaks here and there, which we can get into as well, because that's definitely a big part of my story and where I'm at now. It's been a long healing journey, but we're on the other side of it, which is always a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So going into EMS, just like everyone who does it, you immerse yourself in it. You get super excited. You're running the calls. You're getting to do the lights and sirens thing. For a lot of people, they start out with lights and sirens. They're so cool. I just want to be able to drive fast and, do all that stuff.
Run red lights.
Yeah, exactly. But quickly for me, that kind of subsided, and I actually cared more about the people that I was dealing with. I mean, I still thought it was cool. I was still pretty new to it, but caring for the people and the actual situations that were happening is what I kind of wanted to do. With all the positivity of that and learning, and for the people that don't know, EMS and fire, at least in Tennessee, really for most of the world, they work 24-hour shifts. So you're usually either working 12 hours or you're working 24s. And so my schedule was 24 hours on, 48 hours off, which I absolutely hated that schedule. It's, you work for your full 24, and EMS, ambulances are usually going all night. So there was hardly any sleep. You get off the next day, the whole day is spent recovering and sleeping. I'd go home, go to bed, wake up around 1 or 2, stay up for a little bit and do it again. The next
Try to
day,
get your schedule back on.
yeah, that's when it became a blur.
Yeah.
But then the second day you're off, it was spent recovering. You've been going, your body needs this time to actually recover, and you're not just sleeping all day. And then you get hit again with your next 24, back to it again, the same thing, just being run to death. I mean, hardly any meals. It's hard to get food in, hard to get bathroom breaks in, but somehow you got to figure out how to do it.
Wait, you're telling me in the ambulance you don't have a catheter you could pop in?
I mean, you
We're
could
on the call.
You might-
I gotta use the bath. Oh, okay, we're good.
leave that
Is
for
that
the
how
next.
you would do it?
I was just,
It's the same guy that thought a sheet underwater would save.
yeah.
Well, I can't imagine like how difficult that is, like, because you were starting a family during that time too. Of like that's got to be hard as well.
I was in the field about 2 years before I met my wife.
Okay.
Now wife. But yeah, I mean, just enough for me to start getting burnout.
Yeah.
My sleep schedule, like I said, everything became foggy as far as timeline. I enjoyed going to work, but I could tell that there was definitely some things going on with my body, just that led to some health issues that are thankfully fixed now. I actually got to the point where my body was in adrenal fatigue, which was my body was so going to the max, so stressed out that basically, I mean, it's just couldn't rest. I wasn't going into a deep sleep. I was probably overloading myself with that and the fire service too, because 2013 is when I actually got my first fire cert. So I'd been at the department for a little bit before that, but to actually be able to do stuff and to be able to run the calls, you have to have certain certifications. So more than just your EMT, if you have your EMT stuff, you can go run medical calls, but fire stuff, I mean, you're there to help bring people water if they need it, if they're hot, stuff like that. Support staff. But yeah, so I did that for a couple of years. So basically I was doing my 24s, and then in my off time I was running calls with my department, which was in the coverage area of where I was working on the ambulance. So if you can imagine and this is what most people do when they get into the field, is they love it. It's so cool. It's so fun. So you're working, and then on your off time, you're basically still working. You never give yourself a break. And I loved it, man. I ate it up for years and years. And then I met my wife, and so I still kept doing it. And it got to a point where I got so bad that my wife she wouldn't leave me alone in our house because she thought just to be pretty blunt, she thought I was going to kill myself. Mentally, I was not in a good place. I didn't have plans. I didn't have actions. It never really crossed my mind. But at the same time, I was at that point where I was like, I don't care if it happens, it happens. If someone hits me in a car, I'm just, here I am, So it's just such a level of burnout, such a level of stress that you don't care. You don't care about anything. Your patient care starts going down the drain. Unless it's something really cool, you're just like, this is a waste of my time. And I know that'll resonate with a lot of providers.
Yeah.
But
To be like, you're fine, get up.
Yeah.
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 You know,
Well, and the,
Twisted ankle.
well, and
Let's go.
the thing is, and that was a very good thing. Like not how you're feeling.
Yeah,
but,
right.
But you're getting to live what you were dreaming of, right? You were getting to do what you were wanting to do. But you were also experiencing the burnout and the fatigue and all the mental battles that
Yeah.
came from that. And no matter what field you're in, you have that part where you first get into that field. I remember that with ministry, right? Like when I first got into it, like I'm super excited. I'm all fired up. I'm so proud that I get to do this part. And then when you begin to get in the nitty gritty, and it's amazing that even in ministry, you experience this. The enemy starts picking at certain things, right? And you start dealing with different angles, and it just goes back to the whole thing. And it's a truth that your rest and your self-worth and all that's got to come from God, not from what you do. And there's so many. I know that we're really focused on men with Woodsman. It's a men's ministry. And I know ladies deal with this too, but there's so many men that deal with that because, they get into the field that they want to get in. And they think that's going to fulfill them.
Yep.
And then come to find out, and it might feel good for a little while, but then come to find out there's a hole there.
Yeah. And that line of work became my identity. So I was the firefighter, EMT, and people could respect me now because of that. I didn't have much, self-worth back then as far as what I thought of myself or who God created me to be. So if I did something where I was like, this is a respectable position, then I thought that would change things. I thought people would look at me differently and all of a sudden, and that's just not the case. A lot of people just don't care, to be honest with you. But
Man, 24 on, 48 off.
Yeah.
That's,
That run anyone ragged.
yeah, like
terrible.
you can't get anything in because we work 5 days, like I work 5 days a week, you work 5 days a week, you're off too, but you're only working like a couple hours during the day. You're there. Like you're living in
A couple of us work
apartment.
more than a couple hours.
Hope nobody.
I hope his employment is watching this. Yikes.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? You work like 9 to 5.
I understand what
Yeah.
you're saying, just the way you
It's
said
just-
it.
I travel. He travels for work, and you do too. Sometimes you're stuck in the hotel, but then you're going home and you don't have to come back to this hotel afterwards. Where you're going home for 40 hours, you're going back basically to the hotel, which is work.
Yeah. Well, and the sad part is that, most people in that career had to pick up a second job. So either they're working at another ambulance company doing the same thing, or they're working a whole other job. A lot of people do landscaping, stuff like that. And so they're working that much more on their off days, which is even further disrupting their sleep. And
They're just always tired.
yeah, and it's a cycle. It is a cycle where you will work yourself to death, literally.
Does it still work like that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh man.
So a lot of times you'll hear, well, this field was made to work a second job, which, if you go back and look at the history of the career, a lot of the fire departments in the U.S. started out as volunteer. People were doing full-time jobs and then coming to work that. Obviously the service has evolved and still doing 24s, but most places now, they're hard to get volunteers. It's hard to get, money to support that. And so a lot of places are really struggling just to keep up with the demands. Everything's getting busier. We won't go on the tangent about, healthcare and all that stuff, but, when you call 911 and get picked up for anything because they can't say no, you can call for, I had a lady who called, and she was her 30s, and she sneezed, and unfortunately she did actually dislocate her shoulder, but she sneezed, dislocated her shoulder, and then she wanted to go to the hospital by ambulance because of that. I'm not one to judge and say that's ridiculous. Should a name probably be used for that? No. Did she have anybody else? Maybe not. It could be a painful thing, but just the idea is that there's not really, that's the safety net. That's the safety net in the United States is is your first responders and your hospitals, because if no one else is coming for you, you call 911 and you're going to get somebody.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. You can't deny it. You can't tell these people, sorry, no, because then you get in big trouble if something else happens. So it's all litigations and and lawsuits, and so people are super conscious of what that means. I had one of the funniest. I had a lady who, word for word over the radio, which is recorded by the FCC, is she ate too many seasoned steamed vegetables and her stomach was upset. So she wanted to go to the ambulance or go to the hospital. Sorry.
You shouldn't tell stories about Randy.
Yeah.
No, you said lady to try to make him feel
Yeah,
better.
but yeah.
If it was every time your stomach got upset,
Oh man,
Michael, I had ice cream again.
I need you to get me picked up now.
we told you not to get ice cream anymore, Randy.
Yeah.
So you work through the 24-48 deal. You're not doing great. What happens next?
So I have to, eventually my wife basically forced me out. She said, this is not good.
Wise woman.
Yeah, she's smarter than I am. But she basically went and found jobs for me and was like, you're going to apply. So I would just write my name and do all the stuff. And
I just know her.
I barely remember.
No, you're done.
She's very matter of fact.
Yeah. Wonder where she gets that from.
1 p.m. Make sure
She's got
you're
an
there.
earpiece in with her.
She's actually listening to us right now.
Oh my gosh.
So I did that. And honestly, that job was not great either. I was a meter reader. And so
Oh my gosh. She signed you up to be a meter reader?
whatever it took to get me off the ambulance. So, and
That got you off the ambulance.
Yeah.
Had more of a steady schedule.
something like that. So, I mean, it's hard to not, hard to beat 24s, but, for a worse schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I tried the different schedules. I worked 24s. I went to 12s. There was even a schedule where I was working 3 12s and 2 8s in the middle of the week. On that schedule, you didn't have to work weekends, but, I always got held over because we were so short staffed. There were so many things happening that, a 12-hour day would turn into a 16-hour day. 8-hour day turned into a 12-hour day. So it wasn't any better. It was just different, where I got to barely go home, barely get to sleep, and then just doing it again for 5 days straight, which might have been worse. I don't know. It's pretty bad.
Borderline.
It's psychotic. That's what it was. But so the whole meter reader thing, right? So I did that for a little bit. Man, and that was a ton of walking, because now they have all these electronic ones. So someone can sit in a nice, cool office somewhere, hit a button, and they can shut your power off, or they can do whatever. It's,
Get out of the
crazy.
truck anymore.
Yeah. They can read it from, from anywhere else. But at this point, for whole Knox County, I had to go around and read these meters. We had our set routes, and some of it was cool. One of my routes was downtown Knoxville. So I actually got to go underneath the street, look at all the, if you didn't know, there's actually a hidden street underneath the street.
No way.
So it was basically just like a whole nother city under there. A lot of people don't know that.
How do you get to it?
It's secrets, It's like government secret.
I'm curious myself.
We're going right now.
So that one was kind of cool. I don't really like to go downtown Knoxville. I'm not much for going in really crowded places, but it was cool to get to do that. That's probably the coolest part. Like I said, tons and tons of walking, to the point where my knees would actually lock up. So I wasn't able to bend my knees at all because of just how much walking it was. So then after that, I promoted to what's called a service tech, which is the unfortunate position of turning your power off if you don't pay.
Not from the office.
Not from the office. That's going to your house and pulling your meter and putting some boots on it and, all that stuff. It's a pay raise. And it wasn't the brutality of, just walking all day. If you're really fast, you can make more money doing, meter reading, because it's paid per meter. So there's set money per route. So, but, say you, there's one route. It was so easy. It was a bunch of apartments. which apartments, usually the panels are all on one side of the building. So I just sit there. You're sitting there for a couple minutes, making money. Go to the next one, sit there. And that's all that route was. So I was done by like 10
I'm gonna
in the morning.
I'm gonna revolutionize that industry. You ready? Park at the front of the neighborhood, get a drone, and just fly to each house and read the meter and just go to
Just
the next
go to the
one.
next one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody listening's like, I'm doing that.
I just changed an entire industry.
But so you go to eat downtown or something, and you're like, I know where his meter is. Like,
Yeah, some of them are in some weird places, but there was a lot to it. So part of the crappy part of the job was if your power needed to be shut off because you didn't pay, well, we would do it. We'd always give you notice beforehand, so you had time. Things are hard for people, inflation's hard and all that stuff. And this was some years ago, but if a meter reader misread a reader, they wouldn't send them back up. They would send a service tech. So, basically what that meant too was you're on call for a certain amount of time. So you'd be on call. If you got called at, 6:00 to go across the entire county out to like Maynardville, because we had some stuff kind of close to that line, then you'd have to go which I'm in West Knox. So have to go all the way out east or north and go turn that on and then come back. So, and then, if you started getting back and someone else needed their power turned back on, well, you had to go do it again. So it's, it was a lot, but I didn't mind that as much. It wasn't that bad. I did have an older lady, a seasoned person of this earth, who looked at me and was like, you have a lousy job, right? I mean, you just can't say anything. He's like, well, I'm sorry, but this is what it is. And so you don't let it bother you. You walk away. And it wasn't my favorite. I was conflicted. I don't really ever want to be that guy to do that, but.
Well, usually when somebody is going through tough times, things get shut off or cars get repoed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People just start yelling, "Oh, you get a crap."
Yeah.
Well, we all need jobs.
Yeah.
But it actually makes me think of, to bring it back to scripture, it makes me think of Matthew in the Bible of Matthew being a tax collector. None of these are recorded, but I can imagine as a tax collector, like when you run into situations, especially when he was dealing with being hated by his community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he had a Roman soldier to enforce it. But I imagine there was some moments with Matthew of like, man, I don't want to go through with this, but I kind of have to.
Yeah.
So I know that you are now currently a firefighter. Kind of talk about how God brought you back from where you were, back into it.
So it was always a goal to be back into it. It never really left me. I was relieved to be out of it because there's just a lot less stress. You're not worried about people dying on you, all day, every day. But you also had this desire, I had this desire to be back there actually serving people in that way. One thing, and maybe this is due to my childhood trauma, but really good at compartmentalizing things, which men typically do that. We don't connect all the dots all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my wife tells me. So, really good at compartmentalizing, which meant, we go to these calls. Well, if it's somebody dies on that call, I put it in its box, I shut it, and I go on to the next call, which is expected. It's expected. Mental health in this career is not the greatest. But like I said, that was expected, to be able to move on just because you're having a bad day doesn't, the world doesn't stop.
The job goes on.
Yeah. And so anyways, and I forgot to mention too, at some point while I was working on the ambulance, I did get a job at a fire department. It was definitely not where I needed to be. I needed some healing, some mental healing, just let my body rest. But I eventually left there to go to the metering. So I did get out of it, but I was so messed up at that point that it was not the right place for me at all. And so anyways, fast forward to now, I've been at a couple different fire departments in the local area. And they thankfully work a better schedule. It's more like basically off a 9-day rotation. You work one, off for another one. You work one, you're off for another one. You work one, then you're off for 4 days. So that 4 days you actually got to recover. Usually that third shift was a little rough. You're kind of feeling it, from, fire usually isn't as busy as EMS.
Yeah.
So at least there's typically more rest within the going of the day, whatever. So yeah. And so I got back into the fire service at where I'm at now. And, I was there for a couple years, and then that's when tragedy hit me. So I lost my daughter at 20 weeks. We knew it was a daughter, it was my first girl. And so I took some time off, as much as I had for my PTO. That's all I could get. There was a bereavement policy that I took, so all that together, but it wasn't enough. It was probably the worst, one of the worst times in my life was during that period. And I think that's also the period when the Lord shined the brightest, which is crazy to say, because, we're going to the hospital. I can see it, as I'm thinking about it. I was out training for a day. I was on the truck. I was what's called an engineer, which is basically the one who pumps and operates the truck, get water to the hoses to the fire. Firemen typically focus on fighting the fire. I was the one who made all the other stuff happen. And so I got a call saying, "Hey, something's not right. Need you to come home." So she kind of told me what was going on. I looked at the captain who was there, who's actually my current boss now. And I was like, "Hey man, I'm just letting you know that, I don't know if you know this, but my wife and I were expecting." And he didn't know that I had sunglasses on, so he couldn't see. But he's like, "Congrats." And I shook my head no. I'm like, "It's not good." And so I got sent home pretty quickly. My partner was pretty supportive, all that stuff. And so I left that day and was able to go to the hospital with my wife, and we got an ultrasound. My wife later told me that she knew already. She knew that there was no heartbeat. And so she didn't want to tell me yet. And so we go to the hospital, and of course we don't find anything. And you can watch I don't think that the lady doing it knew that I had some experience with seeing those. So her face changed, and I was like, okay, this is it. She left to go get a doctor, which took a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I were just sitting in this ER room, and we're just like hit by this peace. I mean, I was upset. Like, we were both upset. We were both crying. But man, there was just a peace that, as the Bible says, it surpasses all understanding. Just a peace that I honestly don't think that I should have had from just a real world, just being a man, being there. I don't think I should have had. It was awkward. It was almost awkward. And so, we're sitting there, and everything gets confirmed, and my wife and I, we just start laughing, not like randomly laughing maniacally, but we start almost telling jokes, just to lighten the mood. And, we just knew. We both looked at each other, and I was like, "Do you have peace?" And she was like, "Yeah, I have peace." And so it was a weird couple days knowing that we just lost our daughter, and that we had more peace than we do even on a regular day.
Yeah.
Like, you hear people talk about it. You hear people who going through hard things, and maybe they don't get reprieve, or, whatever it is, but to experience it in that moment. I've had another friend who they lost. So, she gave birth to her son, and they lost him like 7 minutes after. Like, they didn't have much time, but she said she was in that room and she saw Jesus. Now, I've known her and her husband for a while. I used to go over to their house, this is before I was married, go over to their house, and we'd play guitar, and we'd, the husband and I, and, they'd have like ice cream and brownies. Like, it was a cool time, but so I got to know them well. And she told me that story. I was like, that must be so hard. I don't understand how you had that peace, fast forward to then, and now I'm experiencing it. So I recently reached out to her and was like, hey, I remember your story because she posts about it every year on Facebook. So um, to remember him. And so I just reached out this past year. I was like, hey, I have a similar story and I understand what you mean now by the peace.
This is what I really want us to hone in on too. If you talk about that peace, you talk about that, having that, having that in the midst of chaos, right?
Yeah.
Having that in situations where you shouldn't have peace. And I've said this before on the podcast, and we've talked about this. Of the thing I love about Christianity, one of the many things I love about Christianity is God brings you to a point where, and it almost feels goofy saying this, but it's true. He'll bring you to a point of invincibility.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is not that you can't like fall apart, right? But the fact of the matter is you got him holding you together no matter what happens, no matter
Yeah.
what you face. And that peace was not absent of sadness, I'm sure, right?
Right.
Like you're still going to deal with the grief. You're still going to deal with all these other things. But at the same time, it's not absent. You're given peace in the midst of that. I remember,
Yeah.
when my grandfather passed, I was heartbroken, right? Like I was sad, I was heartbroken, but at the same time, I had a peace. I knew
Yeah.
where he was,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I knew, and so the thing I want us to talk a little bit about this, kind of as our final little segment here, but what you do is you get to show up when people are dealing in their darkest moments.
Mm-hmm.
You get to show up when, their grandfather has a heart attack. No one calls you for a good time, right?
Right. No, that's
You know what I mean?
not for a party.
Yeah, right. No one calls the firefighters when everything's going great. No, you call when someone drops at the party in cardiac arrest, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so my question to you is this, because there's a stigma around Christianity, especially amongst men. And I knew in the environment in which I grew up in, it was there too. Of you look at Jesus and you see the Lamb of God, you see the turning of the cheek, you see the whole, love your enemies, which are all true things, right? But you don't really get to see a lot of the Lion of God. And the one that brings peace in the midst of chaos. And I was watching a documentary, and I'm getting there. I'm getting to the point.
Yeah.
Forgive me. But I saw a documentary one time. It was a Navy SEAL training thing, and the guy said that the Navy SEAL recruits that he really looks for is not the strongest, not the fastest, not the quickest, not even the smartest. He said the Navy SEAL that he's most interested in being on his SEAL team is the one that's calm in the sense of chaos.
Yep.
The one that keeps his head when everything's falling apart, because that one is the one that can make a decision in the moment. And so as a believer, you get to bring that in to these moments of chaos. And so kind of talk a little bit about that. How does God use this peace in you, or his presence in you, out there in the field when you go to those calls?
Yeah. So that makes me think of a couple different things. A lot of people in the midst of chaos, some people want to hear, hey, can I pray for you? That stuff. Other people, they don't want to hear it. They want you to fix their problem, and they're so fixated on that. And that gets a lot harder, especially when a family member is actively dying or has just died. A lot of times, the easier situation is we get called out for a cardiac arrest, and you can just pray while you're doing stuff. A lot of people might, like I said, you freak out, but in that moment, you train for it. You're calm. You're thinking through it. You're thinking through your steps, what you need to do next. And so, one thing that I really like to do is I just like to pray. I just like to pray over the person. And I've seen some pretty, miraculous things happen as I've done it. But, the other side of that is it takes me back to another call where it was a cardiac arrest, and they didn't make it. They were older, and I go up to them and I just talk them through it. I was usually the more senior guy on scene and around that time, so I would be the one who went over there and talked to them, say, "Hey, I'm so sorry. We've done everything we can. There's literally nothing else that we can do, and they've passed away." And so you give them their moments, and then I would usually come back in and I would start doing follow up, right? So, all right, so you're going to see the police. It's going to get busy in here. Law enforcement's going to come. You're going to see the medical examiner. You're going to see all these people come in. And, after you kind of explain to them, start kind of pushing that, hey, we're going to be all right. That's usually when I would bring something up. I would either pray for a circumstance just to happen in that moment where it was just divine and God would open their hearts up. But also I've asked some people like, hey, I know that this has happened. What can I do for you? How can I pray for you? How can I do these things for you to ultimately still serve them? Because, you're not just serving the patient, you're serving people's families when you're going to these emergencies. And so that was how I approached it. That's how I approached it. And it usually worked pretty well. I've never been really cursed out for it. I've never been kicked out or anything because it's respectful. You can, hey, you may or may not believe in the Lord. You may or may not do anything, but I would like to be able to pray for you. I'd like to be able to, do this. And most people were receptive to that.
Well, I mean, in that sense, somebody wants somebody to be fixed, healed. They want to see something happen. And at that point, they'll take anything. It's just like when you're dying. Okay, Lord, I believe you. It's that last minute thing because now you're scared. And, I think I bring up Zach's thing where Zach would only go to God when things were like crashing. And some people do that. I wish I could remember what happened in the ambulance ride when we talked about Corbin and him having to go to the ambulance because he hit his head and couldn't move.
Yeah.
I remember being mad at people not getting over fast enough.
Yep.
And the driver's like, like he's calm. And the guy back there's working on doing things with Corbin, calm, but like, you're lucky I couldn't carry because I'm going to move you one way or,
Yep. Yep.
And it's the same thing when my father-in-law died and my wife had to be there to see it all go down. That was a struggle for her.
Yep.
And for me, it was like, let's move and let them do their thing. Like we all knew what was happening. He's had cancer. So for something like what you have to do and you go and you ask to pray, I don't know if anybody's ever, like I said, the ambulance ride, I couldn't remember, but I know they were calm.
Yep.
I wasn't. I was like, the kid that wants to be in the ambulance with the sirens going 100 miles an hour. That's what I wanted to do. But
yeah.
Well, I mean, I appreciate. I think it's awesome that you do it because now everybody's gonna.
And they're
scared.
There's a difference between being calm, and bringing peace.
Yep.
Into those situations, and people can sense that, right? Like my wife and I were on a trip a couple of weeks ago, and when the lady's beside us, she's a fellow believer, and she started a conversation. She said because she goes, I could feel the Holy Spirit, like I could feel a peace around you. And the thing is you get to bring that into what you do, and so many people, looking at what you do, like I said, people call you in the worst moments. It's such a great thing and such a ministry. It really is a ministry that you get to show up in those moments and Jesus is with you.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And kind of going on to, everyone sees the lamb, but not the lion. There's been some situations where you have to really step up too and be very, forward about things. I've had people who have maybe having, some psychotic episodes or some mental episodes where, they're mad that you're not treating their family like they would, like they think you should, kind of like you're saying, it's like, you're thinking, why aren't you doing this? Or why aren't people moving out of the way?
Go fast.
Yeah. Yeah. But you had to listen. We know what we're doing. We're trained. There's one guy who started yelling at us and cursing at us. All of a sudden he's in the back digging around in some drawers. I'm like, we're going to get shot. Like this dude is legitimately mad. And so you do have to step up. There's the other side of, hey, we're not doing this. You got to step up and either you need to retreat or just tell them step by step in more of a forceful way that we know what we're doing. We're going to do this. This is what's going to happen. But you can't shy back.
Yeah.
You can't shy back.
Well, and you got to think about, on the list of the things and I cracked up when I heard this for the first time. You said, no, on the list of things of what would Jesus do, like flipping tables and pulling out a whip is one of the options, right? Like that was one of the things that he did. But my point being is, we live in a society that for lack of better words, demonizes strong masculine male figures, right?
Yeah.
And says that this isn't okay, or you shouldn't be this way. And are there some elements to that? Sure, because you can take anything in the too far in the direction, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're over here and you're just pushing people around and bullying people and talking down on people, like that's not, you're not representing Jesus, right? But there's a difference between that and, as a believer, standing your ground as a godly man and going, hey, this isn't going to happen this way.
Yeah.
We're not going to do this.
Well, and I think people miss the, there's almost an in between the lion and the lamb. And I say that because there was a call that we ran, and I was actually off duty. It was about 3 a.m. and it came out as a structure fire. Well, it turned out that this lady, she was a 16-year-old girl, she had ended up killing herself. And it set off all the smoke detectors and all that stuff. And so we are getting there. I get there, and we're working that situation. My partner and I, we go in and we're making sure the house is okay, make sure there's nothing secondary. And, but I come out after giving my report to the captain. This lady is running up the side, down the street, and she is just like screaming. And I'll never forget the scream. I heard it in my ears just in my head for a year or two after that, every single day, just this terrifying scream. And it was her mother. And so I had to be in that moment almost a little tough for her, because they were still working, like they were doing stuff. So I actually had to stop her and kind of not really, push her back, but hold on to her and get her back, because obviously she's super distraught. Obviously she's, losing her daughter right there. And so you have to be that tender. I think of the woman at the well, right? I think of, everyone was ready to stone her, and the law said that she could be stoned, but Jesus came in and was like, hey, the one without sin, throw the first stone.
Yeah.
Which one of you? And the crowd dissipated. And then he looked at her and was like, get up and sin no more. And that's kind of how I view it. Is you're coming there, you're showing this, hey, you can't do this. This is an emergency operation scene, but I understand it's your daughter. And so let's work on that.
It's bringing both the lion and the lamb
Yes.
into the same situation.
Yes.
Absolutely.
100%.
Well, man, thank you so much for joining today. Before we close out, we're going to do something a little bit different. I want us to pray over you.
Okay.
And then we will wrap up this episode.
Cool.
God, thank you so much for Michael. God, thank you for other firefighters, other EMS workers, other police officers and military, all those. God, thank you for those that serve us. God, we lift him up. God, we pray that you would use him and others like him to shine your light, God, in those dark moments. Father God, we got a real enemy. The Bible tells us that very clearly, and he can cause a lot of chaos. And God, we pray that you would send your light through these people to push back the darkness, God, so that more can know you. We love you. We praise you. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Oh, we're not going
You
to.
going to say it?
Oh, peace.
Thanks for listening to the Words with Woodsman podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. We'll see you next time.